Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. So I can't believe it's already almost November and it's time to set up our journals for this next month. As always, I'm using my bullet journal by Archie and Olive, and you can use my code ArdenBujos to get 10% off, which also helps to support me and my channel. First, I'm just flipping through my October setup and I really loved it, but I was in a bit of a slump towards the middle of the month, so I actually didn't end up using it as much as I would like to, but that's totally okay, and I still loved making the weekly spreads. So there's one more after this one, and then I'm starting my November setup on the next 2 pages. Now for this month, I wasn't totally sure what to do at first, but I ended up deciding on a really cozy fall theme with lots of warm brown tones, and as always the products are going to be listed in the description if you're curious. I actually didn't end up using any black this month, which was kind of a nice change, so yeah, I hope you enjoy the video and let's get started. I started off by making a small overview, and first I'm writing the weekdays on the top with the darkest brown shade, and I went for a more kind of like roundish cute font because I thought it was very fitting for this cozy theme. Then I'm using a bit of a lighter shade for the dates, and I would have preferred using the same one, but this one only has a fine liner on the other side, and I wanted the lines to be a bit thicker, so I went for a different marker, but I still think it worked out in the end. The days here are 2 spaces wide, and I also left 1 space in between each week for a bit more white space. Then I used a very light peachy tone to cross out the days from October and December, and on the bottom I also added a small YouTube and Instagram section where I can just write down my subscriber and follower count on the first day of the month. I also used the orangey marker that I used for the sections for some lines in between the weeks. Next up, for the cover page, I'm using that darkest brown again for the title, and I used the same sort of font and also spaced out the letters quite a bit. With the light peachy shade, I also made a border all around it, and I made it quite thick because I wanted everything to look a bit more like cartoony and just to have thicker lines overall. Then for the decorations, I went for different leaves and small mushrooms, and I kept everything super simple and again made the lines pretty thick. I alternated between a few different leaves and also added the mushrooms in between them with the light peachy color. For the leaves, I switched between the orange and the darkest brown, and I made sure that it's never the same color right next to each other, which I think works great with 3 different shades. I also made the doodles follow a curved line overall, which just adds a bit more movement. Then I continued the doodles on the bottom half, and I also added little sparkles with the dark brown and the orange shade. This one was definitely a really quick and simple cover page, but honestly I didn't have a lot of time to film this month, and I still think it turned out really cute, so I hope you like it as well. So that's the first 2 pages finished, and let's move on to my habit trackers. I kept the title in the same style as on the cover page to keep things nice and consistent, but I just made it a bit smaller so it doesn't take up too much space. I placed it on the left side on the top of the page, and then added a few more doodles on the right to fill out the empty space. For my habit trackers, as always, I'm doing 6 daily habit trackers, and this time I'm placing them on the left side of the page, and I'm first making the borders with the orange shade. The boxes here are 6 spaces tall because they include the weekdays on the top and then the 5 weeks of November, and they're 7 spaces wide for the weekdays. I also left 2 spaces empty in between them, both horizontally and vertically, just so that it doesn't look too cramped. Now for the titles of the habits, I first colored in the background with the light peachy shade, but I didn't end up liking it, so I covered it later with a bit of paper, and so I'm just gonna skip this part a little bit. I wrote the weekdays into the first row of each section with the lighter brown shade, and I also wrote the habits with that same marker, but like I said, I ended up covering them and then writing them again, which you'll see in a bit. Then I filled the space on the right with a bunch of doodles again, and I didn't make them too small just so that there's more empty spaces, and I think it makes the layout look a little bit less chaotic. You could also substitute these doodles for just mushrooms or something similar, and it would work just as well, so I think that's really fun. And as always, if you don't have these exact same markers, just use what you have. And if you want to do a different color scheme altogether, I would recommend picking out a dark, medium, and light shade, just so that it has the same sort of contrast. On the bottom, I just quickly added some weekly habits, and I made 5 circles to fill them in every week once I complete the habit underneath each one. For anyone wondering how I fill out my daily habit trackers, I just usually draw a circle for each day that I complete a habit, and I either just use black or one of the colors from the setup, and I leave the other days empty, but you could also just cross them out or fill out the squares completely, or whatever you feel like doing really. Then, like I mentioned, I covered up the titles for the daily habits, and I used a scrap piece of paper from one of my old journals, and I made sure that the dots line up so that it's not too noticeable. Then I just wrote the titles again, and this month I'm tracking doing my morning routine, not using any social media in the morning, getting up before 9 a.m, planning my day in my bullet journal, working out, and doing my nighttime routine. For the other page, I wanted to do the same layout as last month because I do really enjoy having just sections to plan out the whole month and kind of like general tasks, because it helps me to keep track of everything and just have an overview of the whole month. I made the same sort of title again to keep the layout consistent, and then wrote the titles for the sections with the lighter shade of brown. I made 6 sections in total, just like last month, so for general tasks, workouts, a YouTube section to plan my next video, self-care for some ideas to just kind of relax, and then also for events and goals. I used the light peachy shade to color in the empty spaces next to the titles, and then made the borders again with the orange shade, and I also left half a space underneath the titles just so that they're not too close together. In between the sections, I also left 2 spaces empty, both horizontally and vertically. And lastly, I'm decorating the lower right corner with a little sparkle, just so that they're not completely empty. And that's it for these 2 pages, so let's move on to my first weekly spread of November. I started by making a mini calendar on the top left, and this time I went for a layout where the sections for the weekdays are sort of on the inner part of the page, and then I have lots of space on the outside for decoration. For my bullet journal, the sort of border on the outside is 10 spaces wide, but you can make it however big or small you want depending on how much planning space you need. For the daily sections, I first made circles in the middle of the sections, and then wrote the first letter of the weekdays with the dark brown into them. Then I added a border with the orange shade, and my sections are 8 spaces tall with 1 space in between them, and I placed Monday through Thursday on the left page and then Friday to Sunday on the right. I also made the sort of title towards the outer part of the page, so for the right page I made them on the right side of the sections, and for the dates I just wrote them with the lighter brown on the inner part of the sections, and I wanted to keep them overall really simple this time because I wanted to fill the outer parts of the spread with the doodles, and I thought it would be a bit too much otherwise. Now, unfortunately, I accidentally didn't record this whole section, but I added those same doodles on the left side of the page and also a small section underneath Sunday for the next week, so I just wanted to show them to you a bit slower at least. And lastly, I also filled the other side with those doodles to balance out the whole spread. Honestly, I think I was just a bit too tired because I also didn't film a whole part of the cover page at first, so I had to redo it, but at least it was a really simple theme and it was actually pretty quick. Anyway, that's it for this November setup, so let's go ahead and do a little flip through. I think this theme actually turned out super cute, even though I wasn't too sure about it at first. I really like the color palette, I think it's very fall appropriate, and I also really like the sort of transition from October because it was still a little bit more summery, but this one is definitely full on cozy fall vibes, which I absolutely love. I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. It was a bit of a shorter one this time, but it's also super quick and easy theme. So as always, thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe if you enjoy my content, and I hope I'll see you again next time. Bye!